conversations from the floor. Chair would ask all members to please take their seats. Members and staff to please take their conversations from the floor. For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
I have a motion to recommit at the desk.
Is the gentleman opposed to the bill?
I'm opposed.
The gentleman qualifies. The clerk will report the motion.
Mr. Garamendi of California moves to recommit the bill H.R. 3964 to the Committee on Natural Resources with instructions to report the same back to the House forthwith with the following amendment. Add.
You dispense with?
Is there objection? Seeing none, so ordered. The House will come to order.
We don't need that.
Chair would ask all members to please take their seats. Would ask members and staff to please take their conversations from the floor. The gentleman from California deserves to be heard. The gentleman from California is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. This is the final amendment to the bill, which unfortunately will not kill the bill or send it back to committee. If adopted, the bill will immediately proceed to final passage as amended. Now, perhaps all of you have heard that there's a drought in the West. If you haven't, I'm here to tell you there's a serious drought in the West, not just California, but throughout the West. This particular piece of legislation is said to deal with the drought. It does not. This legislation does two things that every one of us ought to be concerned about. First of all, it is a grab. It is a water grab. It takes water from somebody and gives it to somebody else. Secondly, if you're interested in states' rights, if you're interested in the power of a community to decide its own future, you better be paying attention to this bill.
California will suspend. Gentleman's correct. The House is not in order. The Chair would again ask all members to please take their seats. Ask all members and staff to please take their conversations from the floor.
This bill is very much about the power of a community, a power of a state to decide what it wants to do with its water. This is an issue of profound importance to every state in the West that has a reclamation project, because this bill sets out for the very first time the federal government overriding state constitution, in this case the Constitution of the state of California, state water law and contracts. This is serious stuff. If this were to somehow solve the crisis in California, you may accept it. But it does not. It does not create 1 gallon of water. It simply steals what little water there is available from some and gives it to another. I'd like now to give to my colleague from California, Ami Berra, 1 minute of time.
Thank you. Yeah, I speak in support of this motion because it will make this bill better. This is about protecting existing state law, and the current bill before us takes away state law. It's about protecting our communities, our local rights, our county rights. This motion will make this bill much better. It's incredibly important to the residents in the 5 Delta counties and the folks that I represent that they have water that they can drink. You know, this motion allows us to honor those state, county, and local laws and makes this bill better. I urge my colleagues to support the motion. I yield back.
Thank you. I'd like now to yield 1 minute to my colleague from California, Mr. Huffman.
I thank my colleagues for offering this motion to improve a deeply flawed bill. California is home to over 100 federally recognized tribes, including over 24 in my congressional district. Many tribes, including the Hupa, the Yurok, and the Karuk in my district, depend on wild salmon as both a vital source of economic opportunity and a respected way of life. And
Gentleman will suspend.
Worry.
Gentleman will state his parliamentary.
Mr. Speaker, while House rules...
Gentleman will suspend. Does the gentleman from California yield for a parliamentary inquiry?
Yes.
Will it take my time?
It will.
I'm afraid I cannot yield. Sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman does not yield. The House will be in order. Chair would ask all members to please cease their conversations. Gentleman from California is recognized.
Mr. Chair, some of the water impacted by this bill is critically needed by tribes in my district. This bill explicitly waives state and federal law in a way that almost certainly would lead to additional diversions from the Trinity River, which would undermine tribal fishing and water rights. The Yurok tribe in my district has written about provisions in this bill that they would undermine the federal government's ability to meet its federal trust obligation to protect, preserve, and enhance the trust resources of that tribe. This House has an obligation to clarify that this cynical bill would not diminish any protected tribal water and fishing rights, and so I urge a yes on this motion to recommit, and I thank the gentleman.
Mr. Speaker, resuming my time.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman, Mr. Huffman's time has expired. The gentleman from California has a minute and a half remaining.
Oh. I was going to ask the chairman if he would yield.
Gentleman has a minute and a half remaining.
Sorry for the confusion, members. I want to be very, very clear with you. California water issues go back to the very beginning of the state, the gold rush. And as they've said, whiskey's for drinking, water's for fighting. Unfortunately, this bill does nothing to solve the current crisis in California. What it does, it sets in motion a series of pieces of legislation that will unravel 150 years of California water law and set in place extraordinary chaos. It does deliver water from one area to another area, literally stealing that water and giving it to others. It does override the California State Constitution and what we call the public trust doctrine. That is, the water of California belongs to all the people of California. It is allocated by law, by precedent, and by water rights that are allocated. This overrides that. We don't want the federal government to go there if you care anything about your state, about the water in your state, and about your community. We need a long-term and short-term solution. Fortunately, in the omnibus bill, we did reinstate the federal drought protection, Drought Response Act. We have many of the tools in place to deal with the drought today. What we don't have is money. I would ask the majority to put up a bill that delivers the money to carry out what is already in the law, which we did just 2 weeks ago. Unfortunately, this bill puts in place a new water war, which we do not and cannot have at a time when we need to come together to solve California water problems. Mr. Speaker, I yield back what time I do not have.